Hey guys, I'm your host Tara A. Devlin, and welcome to this week's episode of Kowabana, true Japanese scary stories from around the internet. The latest volume of Kowabana, volume 14, is now out. Collecting even more of your favourite stories from the show, you can find tales of creepy monsters, terrifying ghosts, bizarre curses, haunted buildings, and much, much more. That's Kowabana volume 14, out now. This week, we're looking at some tales of terrifying curses. They can be lurking anywhere, in anything, coming from anyone. Is it even possible to avoid them? Or is it always going to be too late by the time you find out? First up, a collector of gemstones comes across one with a rather interesting, but also deadly history. Find out why in Naru Nashu. This is an ongoing story. This may be a read at your own risk story, so please proceed with caution. Around 7 or 8 years ago, I was really into gemstones, and I collected all sorts. I didn't believe they had any special properties or anything like that. I just thought they were beautiful. I'm a guy, but I like sparkly things. At the time, I'd just started working, however, so there was no way I could afford expensive jewels. As such, I found myself collecting cheap gemstones instead. And once I started, I found myself really getting into it. And before I knew it, I had amassed quite the collection of different stones. One day, I was looking through some online auctions when I found a black stone in the shape of an egg. It was a piece of labradorite about 10 centimeters long. I already had some of this stone, but the one in the photo looked more beautiful than what I had and shone with a mysterious light. I wanted it. I had to have it. I was oddly drawn to it, and when I looked at the price, I was surprised to see it was an unbeatable price, with a buy now option. But it looks to be such good quality, I thought, confused by how dirt cheap it was. The prices of stones vary depending on the quality of them, but no matter how you looked at it, this was a top-grade stone. The description mentioned that it had been bought on an overseas trip, so I convinced myself that it was so cheap because it had already passed through someone else's hands. There were some people who absolutely refused to buy a stone if it was second-hand, but I didn't care about that at all, so I bought it right away. The stone arrived shortly thereafter. It was carefully packed and looked just as beautiful as it did in the photo. It was so cheap that I was a little worried that they might send something different to the picture, but it was the exact same stone. Having made such a great buy, I was elated. I got on the internet to thank the seller, but for some reason, all their information had been deleted. The more I looked at the stone, the more beautiful it got. Seeing its pale glow made me feel an indescribable ecstasy, and so, that night, I fell asleep holding it. And that night, I had a strange dream. I was in a dim forest, tied to a large tree. Before me stood about 10 small children. They all had dark hair, tanned skin, and little clothing. They seemed to be indigenous, and then they all pointed at me and repeated something. Naru, Nashu. Naru? I was dumbfounded. I didn't know what that meant, but then I sensed something slithering above me. It was big, and it was on the same tree I was tied to. However, I couldn't move my neck to look up and check. The whole time, the children in front of me continued chanting the same thing. Naru, Nashu. Looking closer, none of them had any expression whatsoever on their faces. It was as though they were all lifeless. Suddenly, I grew afraid. I tried desperately to wriggle free and run for my life. And then I woke up. I was breathing heavily and covered in sweat. My heart pounded. I looked at the clock and it was already morning. Understanding that what happened had just been a dream, I was relieved. And what a strange dream it was. I left my room to go to the shower on the second floor, and there I ran into my older sister. We still lived at home at the time. "Morning," I said. "Morning." "Hey, what's wrong with your eye?" "My eye?" I looked in the mirror, and my right eye was bloodshot. And over the next few days, I kept having that strange dream. I was tied up. The children chanted, "Naru, Nashu." Something was in the tree above me. Each time I woke up covered in sweat, and each time I was relieved it was just a dream. Maybe the dream held some sort of important meaning. At first, I didn't worry about it too much, but as I kept having the same dream over and over, I started to worry that maybe it wasn't just a dream. And every time I woke up from that dream, my right eye was always bloodshot. Looking back on it, it all started after I bought that black stone. It must have something to do with that, I thought. Ever since I bought it, I carried that black stone with me everywhere. Just looking at it gave me a strange feeling of ecstasy, and I didn't want to let go of it for even a moment. When I went out, it was in my pocket. When I showered, I took it with me. And when I slept, I held it in my hand. I literally kept it on me at all times. And looking back on it now, that was definitely a little abnormal. But when I thought about the dream, I started to realize it was kind of weird. I put the stone on the table in the living room, and as I was staring at it, some of our relatives came to visit. Two of my young cousins, 5-year-old S-kun and 7-year-old Kei-chan, saw me looking at it and came over. "What are you looking at?" S asked. "What's that? Let me see, let me see," Kei said. I'd never shown the stone to anyone before that, but when the children asked, I couldn't say no. I showed it to them. "Wow, it's so pretty," Kei said. S said. While Kei-chan was excited about it, S-kun seemed frightened. "What's wrong?" I asked. "That's scary," he replied. He did not seem to like the stone. Kei-chan laughed at him, but before long the pair left to play outside. That night after dinner, our relatives were getting ready to go home. I was in the kitchen putting away the dishes when suddenly I sensed someone standing behind me. I turned around and Kei-chan was there. Kei-chan? Something wasn't right. Her face was pale and her eyes blank. She was also foaming at the mouth. "Kei-chan? What's wrong? Are you okay?" I knelt down close to her face, and then she said just one word. "Nashu." I had no idea what was happening. Next thing I knew, I was on the ground holding my face, and I could hear S-kun crying. Hearing that, my uncle came running over. "What happened?" he said in a panic when he saw me. I quickly got up, but he made me sit in a chair. "You shouldn't move." My right eye was bleeding, and I watched it drip freely to the floor. "Huh? What happened?" I was just talking to Kei-chan and... Uncle, where's Kei-chan? I asked. Kei? She's right there. Hold on, your mother's bringing a towel. I turned and Kei-chan was standing right next to me. What's wrong? She asked with a strange look on her face. At my feet, I saw a fruit knife covered in blood. Oh yeah. Just before she hit my face with that. But why? And right before she slashed me, she definitely said something. Nash. I immediately went to the hospital. Luckily, there was no major damage to my eye, and I could see perfectly fine, but I was left with a scar around my right eyebrow. Nobody saw what happened, so they chalked it up to me cutting myself when I passed out. I later asked Kei-chan about it, but she didn't seem to remember anything. Next thing I knew, you were lying on the ground, she said. I didn't want to blame her, and I was creeped out by her muttering Nash, so I left it at that. After that, I stopped carrying the black stone around. It had to be the cause. Looking back on it, Kei-chan had touched that stone right before all that went down. There was something strange about it. And so, I decided to get rid of it. But I couldn't just throw it away, so I decided to talk to my friend Y, who had a strong sixth sense about it. Y had spoken to me numerous times about weird spiritual experiences he'd had, but they were usually just stories amongst friends, so I was still a little skeptical as to whether he actually had a real sixth sense or not. Still, just in case, I contacted him. Hey, long time no see, he said. We hadn't spoken for a few months, so after some brief pleasantries, I got to the main topic of conversation. Why? You have a sixth sense, right? Huh? Ah, so that is why you wanted to talk then. It seemed he'd already suspected why I contacted him, and his voice suddenly changed. You know that I collect gemstones, right? Recently, I found this really weird one. And you want me to look at it for you? Yeah. Sure, he said after a brief silence. Hey, are you with anyone right now? Do you have the TV on? No, I'm alone at home. What should we do? Is it bad? No. Look, I'll come over to your place tomorrow, okay? Eh? No, I'll go see you. You don't need to do that. No, this is better. I'll go to you, so you just stay there. The next day, Y arrived shortly after lunch. Hey. Welcome. Come in, I said. My family was out that day, and I led Y, who looked unusually stiff, into the living room. So, where's this stone? Here. I took it out, and Y's complexion changed. Why? He stared at the stone for a moment before speaking. Where on earth did you find this thing? Who did you get it from? I bought it on the internet. Ah. He nodded in agreement and then let out a big sigh. Normally he was so bright and cheerful, so seeing him like that made me scared. Is it dangerous? I asked. I don't know, but it seems like a Goshintai or something. Something to house a deity. A Goshintai? Not a Japanese one, but a foreign one. At any rate, You should take this somewhere where they can properly deal with it. I don't think it's going to have a very positive effect on you, you know? After pausing for a moment, he continued. Is your eye okay? Your right one? Eh? I was shocked. After that strange dream I always had, my right eye was always bloodshot. When I look at this stone, my eye hurts. There's got to be something to it. I remained silent. Hey, if you want, I can take this stone off your hands for you. To be honest, I wasn't expecting to hear that, so I was a little taken aback. I know someone who handles these sorts of things. I can give it to him if you want. I don't think you should keep it here any longer. I was honestly thankful for his offer. I'd grown absolutely terrified of the stone and wanted to get rid of it. That'd be a huge help, but are you sure? Yeah, we've gone too far to turn back now. And I think it's probably better for the kids too. Thanks. You're a lifesaver. What do you mean by kids? You're surrounded by them. They're all pointing at you. All the blood drained from my body. Well, I'll contact you once I've handed it over. Y left with the stone that day, and I finally felt like I'd been released from all that anxiety. I was so relieved that I could sleep again, I thought as I got into bed. But again, I had that dream. I found myself in a gloomy forest. There was a large tree and all those children. Everything was the same as it always was. However, this time, it was Y tied to the big tree, and the children were all clinging to me. Y screamed at me, a terrified look on his face, as he tried desperately to wriggle free from the rope. Looking closer, his right eye had been ripped out, and dark blood dripped from it. I tried to flee too, but the children were incredibly strong and held me in place. There were 10 or so of them, and I couldn't even budge. Naru, Nashu, they muttered, and something moved in the tree above Y. I'd never been able to see it before, but this time I could. It was a giant snake. A giant snake with pale scales slithered down the tree towards Y. When it reached his head, it opened its mouth wide. Y screamed, but I couldn't hear him. His entire head was inside the snake's mouth, and as it wriggled further down, his head was completely gone. I watched in horror. As the snake swallowed Y's head, it turned to look at me. It had no right eye. And then I woke up. It was early morning. My breathing was ragged and my heart pumped wildly. I was covered in sweat and also crying. For a while, I sat on the bed, holding myself as I cried. Y was dead. The snake ate him. But it was a dream. Just a dream. Nothing more. I kept telling myself that, and once I calmed down, I thought I should contact Y, just in case. Yet, I was also strangely anxious, and so I decided to wait for him to contact me first. It was 4 days later when I learnt that Y had died in a traffic accident. He was driving near the entrance of a tunnel, and then he suddenly swerved into the other lane and collided with a car. I went to the scene of the accident, and there was barely any sign that anything had happened there, other than a few small pieces of glass and some tire marks. Why did Y die? I thought as I looked at those marks. Was it my fault? Was he killed because I went to him for advice about that black stone? Even now, 10 years have passed since that accident, and I still can't get rid of the feelings of regret. There's no way that dream I had didn't have anything to do with his death. What was that snake and those children? I really want to ask someone about it, so that's why I'm writing this here. Is there anyone who knows anything about it? I'm just sorry. Considering what happened to Kei-chan and why, and the fact I've never spoken to anyone else about it before, I'm not sure if anything will happen simply from reading this story as well. But that snake seems to be quite vindictive. I still dream about it even now, and my right eye has a cataract, so I can no longer see from it. I also still have a piece of that black stone that I picked up from the scene of Y's accident. It really is beautiful. The couple in this next story find themselves constantly subjected to one particular misfortune. They just can't seem to avoid getting flat tires. But why? What does it really mean, and does someone truly have it out for them? Find out in Flat Tire. This happened a long time ago when I was living with my then girlfriend. The reason we started living together was because she ran away from home after a big fight with her father. He was a master carpenter with an old-fashioned way of thinking. I didn't know him very well, but I was still honestly quite afraid of him. There wasn't anything else we could do, however, so I put together all my money and we found an apartment we could live in together. It had no bath, but that wasn't even the worst of it. It was full of cockroaches, was so damp that the tatami mats kept rotting, and it seemed that a young band member lived above us, because every night he practiced singing as loud as he could. The old guy who lived next door was really creepy too. Well, we eventually got used to living in these terrible conditions together, and I worked part-time at a construction site, while she worked nights at a karaoke box. But about 6 months after we started living together, strange things began to occur. One morning, I got on my bike to go to work, but something felt strange. I checked and the tire was flat. I ended up walking to work that day, and on my day off, I took the bike to the store to get it fixed. The person there said the tire was full of holes, which meant the price for repairing it was going to be a little higher than usual. I think they said there were 5 or 6 holes or something like that. They also said that somebody likely did it on purpose. It seemed to have been punctured with a nail. Because we lived in an apartment with no bathroom, we had to go to the nearby public baths each night. We rode double on the one bike there, bathed, and then got back on the same bike again to go home. One day, as we were leaving the baths, we both reached the bike and got on when we felt something strange. Of course, it had a flat tire again. I took it back to the store to get it fixed again the next day, and again, they said it was full of holes. Another day, my girlfriend got on the bike by herself to buy dinner, but when she left the store, again it had a flat tire. She had to push the heavy bike all the way home. Yet another time, the two of us took the same bike to the station and parked it there. We took the train to hang out in town, and when we came back, again the bike had a flat tire. Every single time, the tire was always full of numerous holes. This happened so regularly that the tire was so patched up that it couldn't be repaired anymore, so we had to buy a new one. In the end, we ended up buying around 3 whole new bikes. According to the store, the cost of removing the tire and putting in a whole new one with labour, would end up costing the same as a cheap second-hand bike. And because we didn't have much money, we ended up doing that whenever the tyre got too bad to fix. Either way, the number of times this happened was far too many for it to simply be a prank, and there was no way they could target our bike so many times unless they were stalking us as well. Both my girlfriend and I could barely handle it anymore. The singer upstairs, the creepy old guy next door. Everyone was a suspect we couldn't trust. But to top it all off, we rented a car and decided to go on holiday somewhere far away. We stopped at a service area on the highway to eat dinner at a restaurant there. And when we got back in the car, again, something felt weird. Like it was leaning to one side. Nervously, I got out of the car and checked the tyres. Both tyres on the right side were flat. The culprit knew of our travel plans and had gotten on the highway to puncture our tyres. Just how much did this one person hate us? I suspected someone might be listening in on us, so I took apart every outlet in our apartment to look for a listening device, but I couldn't find anything. Then one day, I got injured at work. I carelessly stepped right on a nail and was taken to the hospital. There was a chance that nail was rusty, so it was quite the ordeal. When I got home, I told my girlfriend everything that had happened. She was worried about my wound, but then she seemed to realize something, and her expression turned dark. She remained silent for a moment before finally saying what was on her mind. "If you were a tyre, then you would have gone flat." Hearing that, I finally realized my injury could very well be connected to all the flat tyres we were having. I hadn't even thought of that up until that point. But if there was a connection, did that mean the culprit wasn't human? Was it a curse or an evil ghost or something? My girlfriend looked like she was about to burst into tears. "You're thinking about it too much," I said. But inside, I was scared too. I couldn't stop thinking about all sorts of terrible things. Like, was this crappy old apartment cursed? That sort of thing. But the thing that scared me most of all was that my girlfriend might be harmed. I was the one who got hurt this time, but luckily, nothing had yet happened to her. After talking it over for a few weeks, my girlfriend decided that she was going to return home. I was too scared to keep living in the old apartment by myself, but my family lived all the way on the other side of the country, so I couldn't go back there either. I had basically no time to find a new place to live, and with my injured leg, I couldn't work either. I had no choice. But surprisingly, after my girlfriend returned home, I no longer got any flat tyres. We no longer lived together, but we were still seeing each other, so my girlfriend was confused as well. The days and months passed, and one day there was a funeral. My girlfriend's father's funeral. There, I had a chance to talk with my girlfriend and her mother, just the three of us, and I heard a strange story. Apparently, her father hated me a lot. He felt like I stole his precious daughter away. He was a master carpenter. Carpentry involves hammering a lot of nails into wood. It seemed he did that full of resentment towards me, like hammering nails into a straw doll. He said that when he did that, it made him feel better, my girlfriend's mother said with a smile. Was she making some sort of black joke? I don't think that any of that was directly related to my injury or the flat tyres, but after hearing that story, I can't look directly at his photo anymore. Be careful of the gifts you accept. They might be from the heart, sure, but maybe that heart doesn't have the most pure of intentions. Find out why in Mug. My older sister was incredibly popular with the opposite sex. When she was in high school, she was never once single. And after that, she dated rich guys from top-class universities, wealthy foreigners, and top brass company executives as well. But for a period, she dated the manager of the cafe where she worked part-time. I once saw him there and, honestly, he was just your regular, everyday kind of guy. Anyway, around this time my sister started to suffer from autonomic dysfunction and depression and such. She was constantly medicated and slept all the time. I'd visit her in the mornings and evenings to bring her drinks, and one time I accidentally dropped her mug as I was filling it with water. That mug was a present, so she was quite attached to it. Crap, I thought. I played around with it for a bit, seeing if I could get it to stick back together, when I noticed what looked like hair inside the chipped part. Turned out it was hair, so I rode to an overpass in the next prefecture and threw the mug against a pillar, shattering it. When I got back, my sister asked me what happened to the mug, and I told her I dropped it and it broke. Normally, she'd get really angry at me, but instead she just said, "Oh," and went to bed. A short while later, she broke up with the manager, no longer spoke about how depressed she was, and seemed to make a complete recovery. She started another job, and then started dating a really nice, handsome guy from a top-ranking company. Our parents were really happy and wondered what on earth had happened to her. Even her friends were shocked. And then, last year she got married, and they're still happily together today. I think it was that mug that made my sister go crazy like that. But I've never said that to anyone. She said she got that mug from her job, but I don't know whether it was from the manager or one of her co-workers. The manager seemed to be rather popular, so maybe someone was jealous they were dating. Or maybe the manager was just some sort of psycho who gave it to her. Some students find themselves sharing a cursed chain letter, just in case. But it seems there might be more to the letter than meets the eye. Why do some of them keep seeing something different to the others? Find out in Cursed Letter. When I was in junior high, cursed letters were all the rage. When I got back to the classroom after PE class, I took my textbook out of my desk and there was a thick brown envelope inside. "Read this alone," it said in magic marker. I imagined that maybe it was a love letter or something, so I secretly took it home with me. After dinner, I opened it alone in my room, but I did not expect what I saw inside. The student in this photo was bullied by his classmates and then hung himself. In his farewell note, he wrote the names of the students who bullied him, as well as the teacher who turned a blind eye. He also said that once he died, he'd become an evil spirit to curse those who bullied him. Those who see this letter should light a stick of incense for him. Once it turns to ashes, you should then pray, "I'm sorry, please move on in peace." Once you have done that, write your name on another piece of paper and quietly pass this to another student who hasn't yet held a memorial for him. You are allowed to mention this to your parents or teachers, but there's no telling whether his curse will be lifted or not. Misfortune may befall you. This was written on old stationery, and on another sheet of paper from a memo pad, there were the names of about half the class. The last name was a girl I'd barely ever spoken to, and it seemed the list went from boy to girl over and over again. I could ignore it if that was all there was to it, but when I looked at the photo inside the envelope, I got goosebumps. It was an old Polaroid of a young boy. His face was ashy, and he had cotton stuffed up his nose. For some reason, his eyelids were slightly open, and his cloudy eyes were looking at something. But this boy was already dead. He definitely appeared to be looking at something. Why? How? I couldn't help but be fascinated, and I couldn't help but pray for him. I immediately grabbed some incense from our family altar, quietly so my family didn't see me, and then prayed for the boy. A few days later, I quietly slipped the letter into a girl's desk. Relieved that the weight had finally been lifted from my shoulders, I spoke to one of my friends about the letter. His name was already on the list, so I thought speaking to him wouldn't trigger the curse. When I saw that photo, I thought I had to pray for him, you know? I said. Photo? There was a photo, he replied. A month later, the letter had passed through several hands in our class and become quite the topic of conversation. More than half the people who received it said there was no photo inside, while others said there most definitely was one. But the strangest thing of all was that 2 of the girls in our class said that the photo they saw was of a girl. In the end, we didn't even know if the story of that student itself was true or not. Nobody ever said they were going to look into it either. For some reason, they felt like if they did, they were going to see their own face in that photo. Finally this week, a young man keeps dreaming of a mask he saw as a kid, but when he looks into it, he uncovers a terrifying history that might still be haunting him today. Find out why in Mask on the Altar. Some facts have come to light recently, so I'm writing this all down to summarize what happened. It's pretty long, but if you're interested, please check it out. For the last 6 months or so, I've been having a scary dream once every 2 or 3 days. I'm about 5 years old in this dream, and I'm in the house that I lived in at the time, not my current one. In this house, there's a mask on the Shinto altar. "Why is that mask on the altar?" my father says before grabbing it. But for some reason, he can't let go of it, and he begins to panic. Looking closer at it, the left side of the mask is weirdly twisted. At that point, I get so scared that I then wake up. I used to have dreams about zombies and things after watching scary movies, so at first I thought it was something my imagination created all by itself. But after having that same dream numerous times, I decided to ask my mother about it. She gave me an unexpected reply. I remember it well. According to her, when I was 5 years old, our family moved into company housing, and that altar was already there. And there was a creepy mask on it. "It's weird that there's such a strange mask on this altar," he said angrily, grabbing it. But the back of the mask was sticky, and for a moment, he was unable to let go of it. He was so creeped out that he burnt it the same day. After hearing that, I couldn't stop thinking about it, and even now, I still regularly have that same dream. I looked a little more into it, and learnt a little about what happened when I was 5. First, that company housing belonged to Tea Company, which was pretty well known where we lived. They bought empty houses in the area and then used them for employees to live in. I visited that house we actually lived in, but it was way too big for a family of 3, and considering that it was a company house, it was rather grand. Now, nobody lives there, and they use it as a public hall or something. And as I expected, inside, that Shinto altar was still there, just like the one in my dreams. I asked an old man who lived nearby about any masks that might have been on the altar in that public hall. When he heard that, he didn't seem to know what I was talking about, but every year in February or March, they held a festival in that area that used masks, so maybe it had something to do with that. When I was in elementary school, I remember gathering mochi in winter to cook and eat at a festival. I asked him about it, and he said that there was a dancer in that festival who wore a mask. However, that festival was no longer held. 3 months passed after that. In the end, the only thing I was able to dig up was that the mask might have been used in a festival. But even so, I still kept having that same dream. Although I had gotten used to it, the fear never dissipated, and I always screamed whenever I saw that twisted half of the face. When my family and relatives got together for New Year's, I told them about my dreams. I thought maybe some of my elderly relatives might know something about that mask. However, my parents and I were the only ones who lived in that area, so nobody knew anything about it. In February, I suddenly got a call from someone I didn't know. It seemed one of my relatives knew someone who lived in that area, and they asked her about the mask. She knew me when I was a child, but it was still weird to hear her refer to me as Kun when I was now nearly 30 years old. According to that old woman, that mask was definitely used at a festival. I won't say the name because it'll give away where I live. But it was no longer used anymore. The reason the mask was on that altar was because it was used in that festival. Each year, the eldest son of one of the families in the village would dance at the festival. During this particular year, the woman's eldest son, I'll call her Kei-san, was to be the dancer, and apparently he was very excited about it. However, a month before the festival, he was knocked out with a fever. He eventually recovered, but he was no longer allowed to dance at the festival. According to the old woman, it was because they thought he might be contagious. In the end, he fell ill with another fever and then passed away. After that, whoever was supposed to dance in the festival each year then also came down with the same illness Kei-san's eldest son had, and so they ended up suspending the festival indefinitely. One day, when they took the mask out of storage, they found that half of it had deformed. The people wondered if it had been cursed, and so they put it on an altar. However, it was at a shrine at the time, and not in that house. But sadly, my father really did burn that mask, so even if I wanted to get it back, there's no way. An enormous sense of hopelessness overcame me. And then I suddenly thought of Kei-san's eldest son. Had his illness deformed half his face, maybe? I looked in the mirror several times. They say that the right and left sides of a person's face are different, but recently I feel like half of mine has changed quite a bit. One day I went to the library to borrow a CD. Our local library lets you borrow them for free. And some local materials caught my eye. I looked through some of the books hoping to find something on a festival, and there it was. It was just like the old woman had told me. However, there was nothing written about why the festival was no longer held. On the last page, there was a list of names of people who had provided information about the festival. The largest one was a familiar name to me, so I wondered if they might know. I decided to call their house. I'll call them M-san. And so I was able to get even more information than what the old woman had given me. That festival was held from February to March in order to pray for the next year's harvest, and the dancer who wore the mask would invoke the kami-sama to take possession of him. That was why the mask was sacred and generally kept in a small shrine. When the old woman mentioned a shrine, she didn't mean a regular one, but rather one of those little ones you can find on the edge of rice fields and such. It was just speculation, but M-san noted that Kei-san's son died that exact same year that Tea Company built their factory in the area. And because of that, numerous people had to part with their rice fields, and the new housing was built on that land. It seemed that the shrine on those rice fields was used for the festival mask, and they had to destroy it when they moved the mask to a different location. That may have been the trigger for why the dancer in the festival died every year. Once they built a new shrine on another rice field, then the death stopped. Although some say it was only because the festival itself was cancelled. As far as M-san knew, that shrine still existed and he told me where it was. I dropped by on my way home from work, but that area was nothing but houses. Up until recently, it had been rice fields. When I got home, I asked my parents when those fields had been changed into a residential area. It was exactly 6 months ago, right around the time I started having that dream. But figuring that out didn't solve anything. There was no mask, no festival, and no place to build a shrine either. I still wake up from bad dreams, and half my face is swollen and red every now and then. I've been to the doctor, but he just said it was a rash. Every day on my way home from work, I see that new residential area where the shrine used to be, and each time I spit out words of resentment. It was you who should have been cursed. These days, people tend to have enough food to eat, so they don't really think about it that much. But back when that festival was around, I think that mask and that dance were integral to the people's ability to stay alive. And on top of that, some strangers from an unknown place then came in and built a house on top of all that. I think the twisted mask represents the angry feelings of those whose thoughts and feelings have been trampled on. And as I've been writing this, I also learnt that there was a stone monument in addition to the shrine that was used to pray for good harvests. However, the swelling in my face still hasn't gone down. A massive thank you and shout out to this week's Kami tier members, Just Sawn and Emerald. It's thanks to your support, along with everyone else, that I'm able to keep doing this show, so thank you very much. Don't forget to check out Kowabana Volume 14, out on Amazon right now. And check out our merchandise store at kowabana.store. And if you'd like to chat about this week's stories, come and join us in the Kowabana Discord. You can find that link in the description or on kowabana.net. You can also check out our Patreon at patreon.com/TaraADevlin for exclusive bonus stories and extras, or our YouTube channel at youtube.com/KowabanaJapan for all sorts of Japanese horror you won't find anywhere else. Thanks guys, stay safe, and I'll see you again next time for even more Kowabana, true Japanese scary stories from around the internet. Want even more scary stories? Head over to kowabana.net for new translations every week. You can also join our Patreon for exclusive stories you won't find anywhere else. Head over to kowabana.net now.